Beaufort County, South Carolina, June 17, 1853.
It began with a scream, short, guttural, then silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong, like something sacred had just been broken. Outside, the Whitmore estate slept in illusion. Fireflies blinking between cypress trees, shutters drawn, tight against the summer heat, magnolias blooming like ghosts under moonlight. But inside the stables, something wicked had unfolded. The lantern above stall 4 flickered once, then sputtered out. The horses grew restless. One kicked its stall, another snorted, stomping anxiously on the hay-covered floor. Moonlight spilled through the slats of the barn wall, slicing the dark into ribbons of silver. Dust floated in the air like ash, and there, between the feed buckets and the straw bedding, a shape slumped forward, a body, boots stretched out, one foot twisted unnaturally. Blood pooled beneath the hay, slowly darkening the wood beneath. And just inches away, torn and stained, lay a single sheet of paper, its edges curled from humidity, its ink bled from sweat, its secret exposed. Miss Eleanor Whitmore. The name danced across the top in soft cursive, too soft to belong, to a man who spent his days guiding reins and hoisting crates. But the handwriting was unmistakably his, the coachman. Imagine standing in that barn at that very moment, the sharp scent of horse manure mixing with blood, the wind rustling the rafters, your eyes scanning that letter, your heart sinking as the truth bleeds into your gut. It wasn't just a note, it was a confession, a promise, a plan, and someone had read it. Someone who shouldn't have. The letter had been folded once, hidden in the hem of a petticoat, meant only for Eleanor's hands, but now it was unfolded. Open. Judged. That's when the butler stormed in. His footsteps echoed down the wooden corridor like gunshots. He'd heard the horses, the scream, the disturbance. In his right hand, a rusted lantern. In his left, a switchblade, just in case. The light flared, casting long shadows across the barn. He stopped. His eyes scanned the scene. One man on the ground, another still standing, knife trembling in his grip. The love letter between them, the standing. Figure wasn't dressed like a killer. No blood on his shirt, no hatred in his eyes, just shock, horror. Like the world had cracked open in front of him and he had no words to seal it back. But the blood said otherwise. You can almost hear the butler whisper it. What in God's name happened here? And upstairs, just a few hundred feet away, the Whitmore mansion remained blissfully unaware. Chandeliers still glowed. The evening's card game was still in progress. Crystal goblets still clinked against silver trays. Eleanor was likely brushing her hair, humming some lullaby, waiting for morning, and for Josiah's letter. She had no idea that someone else had gotten to it first, that someone had slit it open, that someone had slit something else. And outside, the moon hung low over Beaufort like an unblinking witness. But who found the letter? And why had it been opened? You wouldn't know it from the outside. Not from the glistening columns, or the marble steps, or the way the magnolias framed the whitewashed facade like a painting. The Whitmore estate was a southern jewel, 3 floors of opulence built on broken backs. The parlour alone boasted more imported luxury than most households in Charleston. Velvet curtains from France, mahogany furniture shipped from Havana, oil portraits that watched you from gilded frames. The floor was polished, so bright you could see the sky in it. At the centre of it all stood Eleanor Whitmore, young, unmarried, untouched by sun or soil. She moved like a song, elegant, rehearsed, refined. Her fingers smelled of rosewater and parchment. Her mind wandered far from drawing rooms and debutante balls. She had never known hunger, never bent to pick cotton, never scrubbed a chamber pot. But behind the estate, only 50 feet away, another world festered. The slave quarters were a row of crooked cabins choked by weeds and mildew. Their roofs leaked. Their floors were dirt. Their walls held the sound of children coughing through. The night, of old women whispering names they dared not say out loud. The air was thick with sweat, ash, and something else. Resignation. And in the corner of the last cabin, Josiah laid his head. He was the coachman, 28, strong shoulders, quiet eyes, a man who had learned to look down but never lost, the fire in his chest. By day, he drove Eleanor across town, her parasol shading her from heat that blistered him. By night, he wrote. Slow, clumsy letters on parchment, stolen from the library, inked with a broken quill. Letters addressed to her, letters filled with longing, letters never meant to be found. Imagine watching this unfold with your own eyes. White girl in a corseted gown glancing toward the stables during supper. A slave man beneath her window, listening for the scrape of shutters. Their hands never touching in daylight, only in the hours when the world forgot them. But someone hadn't forgotten. Someone had been watching, and while Eleanor played Beethoven on the parlor piano, her fingers dancing, Josiah was in the back barn, brushing down the horses, sweat trailing his spine like fingers. Neither of them noticed the boy who lingered, near the laundry line, the boy who saw her slip the letter into the folded saddlecloth, the boy who saw him take it. Curiosity is a dangerous thing in a place built on secrets, and cruelty even more dangerous when it hides behind a smile. That night, supper was served with honey-glazed duck and candied yams. The wine was dark and heavy. The guests laughed too loudly. And at the far end of the table, Eleanor smiled politely while her father discussed cotton prices and war rumors. But under that table, her foot tapped once, then twice. She was counting the hours until midnight. The hour of letters, of glances, of soft hope. She didn't know the letter was already gone. She didn't know it had been read. And behind the house, where lanterns didn't reach, the boy handed the crumpled paper to a man with a limp and a voice like gravel, the overseer, the one who'd been waiting for proof, and now he had it. But what would he do with it? Before the blood, before the letter, before the betrayal, there was stillness, not peace, never that, but a fragile quiet, the kind that settles over forbidden things. It began by the creek, a place no one watched, a place where the trees leaned in like conspirators, where dragonflies skimmed the surface of muddy water, and no one cared what name you were born with. Eleanor had escaped another suffocating etiquette lesson. Her governess droned on about posture and propriety, while Eleanor's thoughts drifted to the stables, to Josiah. He was there again, shirt rolled to the elbow, mending a broken harness. His skin glistened in the heat, his humming low and steady, a song without words, a rhythm older than chains. She didn't mean to stay, she only meant to watch. But when he looked up and saw her, he didn't flinch. He nodded. Once, silent, she stepped closer. That was the first moment, the first ripple in the calm. Over the next weeks, it became a pattern. Eleanor would linger near the back gardens longer than necessary. Josiah would take the long path back, from the town deliveries. Sometimes their hands would brush, other times, only their eyes met. He taught her how to saddle a horse without a servant's help. She taught him to read from an old poetry book her mother never touched. They shared verses in the quiet. She walks in beauty, like the night. And Eleanor began to imagine a different life. One far from chandeliers and arranged marriages. One without cotton fields or ballroom lies. One where names and skin didn't matter. Josiah didn't encourage it, not at first, but he didn't stop it either, because he had dreamed once too, before the dreams were beaten out of him. Still, he knew the cost. He knew the stories, of men whipped for looking the wrong way, of women locked away for touching what was not theirs, of love that turned to noose, and yet, there she was, every afternoon, every letter, every promise. Eleanor whispered about running away, about New York, about a life that's ours. He shook his head at first, but one night, beneath the cypress trees, he said, "Write it down. If you mean it, write it down." And so she did. On June 17th, Eleanor folded the letter with trembling fingers and tucked it into the saddle blanket before dinner. She believed it would reach him. She believed no one would see, but someone always sees. Imagine that moment, her heart thudding with dangerous hope, his hands unfolding the letter in a barn lit by a single candle, and just beyond the stall door, the slow click of boots on wood. This wasn't their ending, not yet. But the moment that letter unfolded, the world began to close in, and the man who saw it all had nothing left in his heart but salt and vengeance. The moon had seen many things over the Whitmore estate, the quiet cruelty of cotton season, the hush of slave hymns sung in the dark, the slow unraveling of secrets behind curtained windows. But that night, the moon saw something it had no name for. The engagement was set. Eleanor Whitmore was to be married to Augustus Bellamy, son of a railroad baron, cousin to a judge, a man with tobacco-stained teeth and ambitions taller than his intellect. The match had been arranged since she was 15. Her dowry sealed it. Her silence guaranteed it. But silence cannot hold when the heart is screaming. Earlier that day, she had slipped the letter into the saddle blanket. A confession, a promise, and an escape plan. A trusted wagoner named Clay, a free black man who hauled lumber for the estate, had agreed to ferry Josiah north in the dead of night. A network had already been arranged. Pennsylvania, papers, a place where Josiah could breathe. Eleanor was to follow weeks later under the guise of a cousin's wedding. They would reunite in New York. They would vanish, but no one ever vanishes in the South. At 10:43 p.m., Josiah crept into the barn. He moved silently, barefoot, the way you do when you've lived your whole life trying not to be heard. He reached into the saddlecloth. The letter was gone. Only a scrap remained, torn, wet, and stuck to the edge of a feed trough. He froze. Low creak echoed through the rafters. Then footsteps, then breathing. Imagine standing in that barn, no weapons, no words, just the crackle of fear in your chest. What would you do if you were trapped here, hunted by shadows and promises alike? Josiah stepped back. A figure emerged from the dark. It wasn't the overseer. It wasn't Eleanor. It was Daniel, a field hand. Young, thin, untrustworthy, the kind of man who listened at doors and smiled too much around white folks. He held the letter in one hand, and in the other, a knife. "You think you better than us?" Daniel spat, voice low. "You think you can steal her and run? You think the rest of us won't pay?" Josiah raised his hands slowly. "I never meant to." But the knife lunged. First, a slash across the arm, a shove into the hay, a struggle of breath and boots and betrayal. They grappled beside the stalls, silent, violent, desperate. And then, one stab too deep. Blood soaked the hay. The knife clattered to the floor, Daniel's eyes wide, glassy, final. Josiah staggered back, shaking, trembling. Then a door burst open. The butler, lantern blazing, face frozen, and Josiah, bloodied, breathless, letter at his feet, became exactly what they'd feared all along. And upstairs, Eleanor still waited, brushing her hair, counting the minutes, not knowing that everything they'd built was already burning. The sun did not rise gently that morning. It cracked over the horizon like a whip. By the time the first rooster crowed, Josiah was tied to the whipping post. The same post used for runaways, for mouthy boys, for mothers who dared to beg. But Josiah wasn't just any man now, not to them. He wasn't a coachman. He was a criminal, a seducer, a killer. The estate buzzed like a hive. House slaves hurried to clean blood from the barn. The overseer barked orders to dig a shallow grave. No one said Daniel's name. No one asked what really happened. The version written by white mouths had already become scripture. And Josiah's fate, it was to be spectacle. They made the others watch, cook, stable boys, children, the ones who knew better than to look, and looked anyway. He was shirtless, back bare, wrists bound tight, blood from the night before still crusted on his ribs. The overseer read the charges aloud. Seduction of a white woman, theft, conspiracy, violence. His voice dripped with moral righteousness, as if he had been betrayed. The air was still, heavy. No birds sang. Then the whip cracked. Once. Twice. A scream on the third. By the 7th lash, skin peeled from muscle. By the 10th, Josiah sagged, forward, barely conscious. By the 12th, he stopped making sound, and yet they did not stop. You can almost hear it now, the sound of raw flesh splitting open, the whimpers of a child in the crowd, the wind refusing to blow. Behind a curtain in the upper hall, Eleanor watched. She had woken to chaos, her father banging on her door, the housemaids whispering of blood in the barn. She wasn't allowed to go outside. So she found a window, and she saw everything. Her hands shook, her breath hitched, but her eyes never left him. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run to him, but she did nothing. Because Eleanor had learned one truth too late. White women in the South were not free, only caged in prettier rooms. By the time the overseer dropped the whip, the dirt beneath Josiah was soaked red. He didn't move. Not when they cut him down. Not when they dragged him into the storage shed behind the stables. Not even when Eleanor slipped from the house hours later and found him lying still. She fell to her knees beside him, whispered his name. Once, then again. His eyes fluttered, one breath, then another, but no words came. Only silence. And when she looked up, hands bloodied, hair unpinned, her mother stood at the edge of the doorway, face pale, mouth trembling. "What have you done?" she whispered. The blood was washed away, the post was scrubbed, the grave filled, and the story buried just as deep. No one mentioned the letter again, not at supper, not in church, not even in whispers. It was as if the Whitmore family had erased an entire man from the record, and with him the truth. The official version went like this. The coachman attacked a fellow servant in a jealous rage. Miss Eleanor had nothing to do with it. Her wedding to Mr. Bellamy is postponed, out of grief. But grief looks different when your heart's been shattered, not your schedule. Eleanor didn't eat, didn't speak, didn't leave her room for 8 days. Her mother sent for doctors, her father sent for boarding schools. None of it mattered, because Eleanor was already gone, not in body, but in spirit. Each morning, she walked to the magnolia tree at the back of the estate. The eye, one that bloomed soft white petals even when the soil beneath it was cracked. The one where she and Josiah had once sat, reciting poetry as if they had time. She sat beneath it every day, silent, barefoot, unmoving. And each time the wind passed through the branches, she swore she could hear his voice in it. One night, during a thunderstorm, she vanished. The servants said she'd run away to the north. Her parents claimed she was sent to a convent. Some whispered she walked straight into the river in her wedding dress and never came back. But no one could say for sure. All that remained was the tree, and every spring, when the magnolia bloomed, one petal turned red. Always just one. A boy once asked his grandmother why. She answered, "Because the South don't forget love like that, or punishments that deep." And the wind blew soft, and the story faded again, until now. Josiah and Eleanor were never meant to survive in their world. Not as lovers, not as equals, not even as rumors. But their defiance was real, and the price they paid was everything. Stories like this must never be forgotten. if you want, to uncover more untold truths buried beneath the southern soil. Stay with us. What comes next may shake you even deeper.